So, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. Wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa ashabihi ajma'in. Rabbana zidna ilman wa al-hikna bis salihin. I am glad to introduce today Dr. Shoaib Ahmed Malik. Everybody knows him, but let me just say a few things about him also. That he is originally from Pakistan, but he was born and raised in Kuwait. And then he went to the UK to study chemical engineering. And then he had, with honor degrees, undergraduate program at the University of Bath in 2010. And then he received his PhD, also in chemistry and chemical engineering at the University of Nottingham in 2015. Now, don't think that he will be talking about chemical engineering, because besides that, he also studied in Islamic studies, as we would say in English probably, but more specifically, Dr. Shoaib decided to pursue his studies in Kalam and in Islamic philosophy. And then he also studied under Avicenna Academy, where he obtained ijazas in Hadith and Aqidah, so in Islamic sciences. And then currently also, he's doing what is called Alimiya program at Al-Balagh Academy. And he also has Master of Science in Philosophy of Science and Religion from University of Edinburgh. And Dr. Shoaib currently holds the position of Assistant Professor of Natural Sciences at the Zayed University in Dubai. And his research is in Islam and science, atheism, and Islamic theology. He has a monograph coming out with Routledge on Islam and evolution. We remember that, he's especially specialized on this. And also the talk that he will give today will be relevant to this topic, Al-Ghazali, Islam and Evolution. So I am glad that he accepted to give us this seminar today. I am introducing him with great pleasure. Yes, Dr. Shoaib, you can start now.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Thank you very much for inviting me. I feel very honored and privileged to be here. Professor Al-Farslan, thank you for the introduction. I was actually very excited to listen to Hussein Turner today. That the abstract was really interesting from the disciplinary point of view of my research. And I really want to get his thoughts. But I know that something's happened, so lo and behold, it's me presenting today. So what I've given this presentation a few times, and it ends up going to 2.5 hours, but I'm going to try and keep it very simple and short so we can hopefully open this for Q&A. For the past 3 years, I've been researching on the territory of Islam and evolution. I've published already a few articles on this, but I wanted to kind of synthesize my thoughts into a book. I submitted a proposal to Routledge, the particular Science and Religion series that's edited by Mark Harris and Michael Burdett. They accepted it. It's now in the final stages. So I'm currently just, fine-tuning the book, the manuscript right now, as I get in more feedback. And it should be out, inshallah, by earliest March 2021, the latest June 2021. So this is when it's expected to come out. What I'm going to present is a broad summary of my work. There's a lot of stuff in that I don't actually mention in here, but hopefully we can pick on those points if you so wish later on. So the overview that I would like to kind of cover today is just touch on 4 main points. What is evolution? I think it's important to have a baseline of this subject because when you ask people evolution, sometimes they may or may not know what the scientific understanding is, or they may have an erroneous understanding of it. So having a baseline is just important. Which kind of evolution am I talking about? Then there's an issue of classification. When I first started looking into the literature, all the Muslim opinions out there on evolution, there is a lot, by the way, there's a lot of opinions on Islam and evolution. There had to be a way in which you can classify this sensibly. So I will introduce my classification scheme and then use that to be able to appropriate the discussion. Finally, from the Ash'ari point of view, so I interpret Al-Ghazali as an Ash'ari thinker. So I'm looking at his work mostly as a Kalam scholar more than anything else. And then I'm going to be taking his paradigm and then interpreting two possibilities: metaphysical possibilities, i.e. what God is able to do, and then hermeneutic possibilities, how far can we go with evolution readings in Islamic scripture. So this is the first quarter of the presentation. What is evolution? For my purposes, I just want to boil this down to three main principles. Evolution rests on all of these, and the particular rendition that I'm talking about is neo-Darwinian evolution, not Darwinian, neo-Darwinian evolution. This involves three propositions. The first thing is something called deep time. Deep time is this idea that the earth must have been really, really old. We're talking about in the period of billions of years. So this breaks from our historical understanding, where some earlier thinkers perhaps thought that the world was only 6,000 to 10,000 years old. So this is something that science has kind of broken away from. The second principle is known as common ancestry. So there's a diagram on the right-hand side. So just like I have parents, my parents have parents, they have parents, and keep on extending this into a family tree, you have a lineage. Evolution goes one step further. Evolutionists say that everything in the biological world is connected in a biohistorical lineage. This means, it entails that humans just didn't pop into existence. They were not just created out of nothing. They have parents. Humans came out of an earlier species, and that's why this is the main area where Islam and evolution begins to come to the fore, because we have been, we've traditionally understood that Islamic scripture tells us that Adam is the first of humankind, and he was created miraculously. And so you see some tension between these two fields. Finally, the third proposition of evolution is natural selection and random mutation. Now, these are just the mechanics of how evolution plays out. Natural selection is simply the idea that when you put animals in a particular environment, they begin adapting according to the demands of the environment. So if you take a few species, can be whatever species you want, you put them into a very hot territory like the desert, and you let that tape of life play for hundreds and thousands of years, you'll begin to see that those same species will now develop new traits that are suited for that environment. So if they have thick fur, they'll have thinner fur, because you cannot live with a thick fur in a desert. So that's natural selection. Random mutation is what we refer to as the changes in your genetic material. Everything on Earth has genetic material, humans included. And the way it works is that this material, as it gets passed on from parent to son and on and on and on through successive generations, we eventually see there are things that change in the genetic material that give rise to the physical things. So to give you a very crude example, there's a part of your DNA that is responsible for your hair color. There's a part of your DNA that's responsible for your height. Eventually, if you tweak these over long periods of time, this in conjunction with natural selection explains the very large biodiversity that we see historically and today on Earth. So it's a collection of these three principles through which we get the interpretation of neo-Darwinian evolution. So this is what I'll be taking as my starting point for the conversation. Now, we'll move on to the classification scheme. So when I started looking into the discussion about Islam and evolution, there's tons of literature. I mean, I have books by Turkish academics, Malaysian academics, Arab academics from all parts of the world. And it was very difficult to kind of make sense of this because people were arguing from different vantage points, from different disciplines. So I wanted to identify a scheme where I could simplify and summarize all these opinions into a unidimensional classification. Unidimensional, I mean, according to one variable. So that makes sense, it makes constructive sense of the literature that's out there. The scheme that I came up with is the following. I focus just on the question of common ancestry. So if you zoom in common ancestry, what do people accept is and isn't a part of evolution? So the first row is creationism. In this camp, people believe that nothing is a part of common ancestry. Yani Allah, He created every single entity instantaneously. There's nothing that was related to another. There's no bi-historical independence. People like Sayyid Hussein Nasr, he is in this camp. I think some of you guys will know Harun Yahya, he would fit into this camp. So that's the creationism model. Human exceptionalism is this idea that we can accept evolution occurring for non-humans. So this includes, plants, and this includes animals, but the only exceptions to this entire process are human beings. And they are just disqualified from this because of several reasons. People present scriptural reasons, people present arguments of nobility. We can get into all of that later on. But the idea here is that humans are excluded from the process of evolution. Some people who fit into this camp are people like Yasir Qadhi and Sheikh Nu Keller. The third position is known as Adamic Exceptionalism. Here, this is a unique position that is argued by David Solomon Jalajel. He makes the argument that non-humans are definitely, they can be parts of the evolutionary process, and so can humans. But Adam is the exception. His argument works on the premise that the Quran talks about the miraculous creation of Adam, but the Quran is completely silent on the possibility of there being either co or pre-Adamic human beings when Adam alayhis salam descended down to earth. Since the Quran is silent on the matter, it raises the possibility, and the Quran is compatible with the possibility of there being humans already there that came out through the process of evolution. So if people were to ask, are humans a product of evolution? We can say yes. To make this argument clearer, in the Quran, we don't have any arguments against the dinosaurs. We don't have arguments for the dinosaurs. So whether you believe in dinosaurs or not, from the Quranic perspective, is irrelevant. The same thing here. There is nothing in the Quran that negates the possibility, nor affirms the possibility of there being human beings already on earth when Adam came down to earth. Accordingly, human evolution is possible, but Adam is the isolated individual who is a miracle. Adam and Eve, of course. I'm lumping those two together in Adamic Exceptionism. Finally is the no exceptions model. So in this camp, people take no exceptions whatsoever. So they completely believe the evolutionary process inside out. So every human being, every creature must have been produced through the mechanics of evolution. You have people like Dr. Nadajani, Dr. Al-Ghazali, who fit into this camp. Now, creationism and the no exceptions camp are clear opposites of one another. So you have one camp who believes that common ancestry entirely is untrue. There's nothing that is historically related. And then you have the other camp which says that evolution is entirely true. Now, I have some diagrams to kind of help you make sense of human exceptionism and Adamic exceptionism. Here, this is the same diagram that we looked at earlier. Instead of pointing upwards, it's just pointing towards the right-hand side. So if you look at the diagram on the left, here we see the branching process of multiple species coming out. This is occurring over 60 million years. The diagram in the middle focuses on and zooms in on where you see a division between chimps and humans. And then you have various species that are occurring between that camp. And then finally, if you look at the right diagram between 2 to 0 million years ago, here we see the various entities that were around the time of the early Homo sapiens, including Adam. So you have Homo erectus, you have Homo heidelbergensis, Denisova, Neanderthalensis. Who they are, what they are is irrelevant. Just note that they're very, very physically and intellectually, physiologically as well, close to human beings in terms of structure and mental aptitude. Now, human exceptionism is defined by this diagram. Here we have Adam, who, if you see the white dot, that is Adam appearing out of nowhere. So that is his miraculous creation. And then when he was created, he started the Homo sapien line. Homo sapien is just a fancy term for human beings in the contemporary literature, right? So you can see that there's no connecting lineage between Adam and all of the preceding entities. So he was created afresh. He had no parents. He had nothing that he was born out of. It's just him being created on earth afresh, and then Homo sapiens started off. This is known as human exceptionism. This is the human exceptionism category. The person who argues for this kind of territory is Yasir Qadhi and Nazir Khan. They have an article out that came out with the Yaqeen Institute. This is slightly different to Adamic exceptionalism. So you have the same diagram here. Now, David says that the only exception to the process is Adam himself, right? But there's nothing that scripture denies in terms of Homo sapiens already being there. And when they were there, Adam could have appeared onto earth and he could have, integrated with them, and they started some kind of, lineage. So he gives several possibilities. So you see those white dots, those white circles. He says that they could be at any time period, because from a biological point of view, the category which we identify as Homo sapien is blurry. So when do you start Homo sapiens? When do you stop Homo sapiens? When do you stop Homo heidelbergensis? So because of those blurry lines, right, there are multiple possibilities at which Adam could have appeared. And he highlights those in his work. He doesn't actually have a diagram. He has it in his book. Unfortunately, the book is very misrepresentative of what he's actually trying to say. So in order to kind of accommodate his view better, this is a diagram that I constructed to hopefully help convey his position. So if you see the Homo sapien line already existed, one possibility is that they were already there. Adam came into the picture, and then the Homo sapien line continued. So now his argument is that there's nothing in the Quran that negates his position, because from the Quran, we can definitely, a qat'i thing that we can get is that everything has a lineage traced back to Adam. That's crystal clear. But there's nothing stopping us from saying that there are also entities or Homo sapiens who could have integrated with Adam or his descendants. So this is Adamic exceptionalism here. If there are any questions, please do let me know later on, but I'll just move on to the third quarter of the presentation. So as you guys know, there are three doctrinal schools in Sunni Islam, right? So as a Sunni scholar, I was just trying to look at the discussion from a Sunni strand. And here you have the Ash'ari school, Maturidi school, the Athari school. My particular adopted perspective was the Ash'ari school through the lens of Ghazali. And I'm aware that there are a lot of hermeneutic challenges with Ghazali because of the diversity of his works. There are a lot of interesting ways that you can interpret Ghazali. In fact, in the past 2 decades, you will see very different viewpoints of how Ghazali should be interpreted. Some interpret him as some kind of covert and Avicenna thinker. This is the opinion of, for example, people like Richard Frank. Others like Michael Marmura, they argue he's a standard Ash'ari thinker, maybe Ash'ari person who adopted the Ash'ari worldview. So for the sake of my presentation and my work, I've taken the second position where I assume he's an Ash'ari thinker, but I do acknowledge the challenges of intellectual historians that come with the territory. There's just a couple of principles that I use. In the book, I kind of go into much more detail, but this is just a starting point to kind of help with the conversation. So one of the things that he makes it very clear, particularly in his Faisal Tafriqa, is that he believes that in order to call somebody kafir, somebody who has left the fold of Islam, they must revoke one of these three principles: God, Prophet, hereafter. Everything is kind of secondary in his point of view. So that's why if you read his works, for instance, he has a very, very tolerant perspective of who can be called kafir or not. And the reason why I'm pointing that out is because in the discussion of Islam and evolution, these words have been thrown around. Sheikh Nukeller says very clearly in his work that anybody who accepts human evolution has done kufr, right? So that's why I'm kind of raising this to kind of highlight the sensitivity of the discussion. So for Ghazali, the primary articles of faith are God, Prophet, hereafter. And he adds a secondary point, and that is that anything that is mutawatir, anything that follows the mutawatir status, has to be believed. You cannot deny anything that is mutawatir. So this includes the Quran and a few ahadith that come with the discussion, right? Now, so that's point number one. Number two, God, this is something that I try to emphasize in terms of creating a distinction of what is theologically possible versus what is scientifically possible. From a theological angle, God can do whatever he wants, and this is a famous axiom in the Ash'ari school, as long as it is jaiz aqlan, as long as it is logically possible, he can do it. If he wanted to, he could have created a totally chaotic world with no regularities, no laws of nature, if he so wishes. If he wanted to, he could have created a world where human beings have 3 heads, 5 legs, whatever he wanted to. There's nothing stopping God from doing any of that. So, of course, now all those things are kind of scientifically impossible, right? We know that from the laws of science, we cannot take a wooden stick and then convert into a real life snake, which was the miracle of Moses. We know that if you cannot somehow raise the seas and allow people to travel through, those are miracles. So there is this very important distinction between what is the modality according to science and what is the modality according to God's power, creative power. And scientific possibilities are always a subset of theological possibilities. And the reason why I'm stressing this is to showcase that Ghazali would have no problem accepting miracles. In the modern strand, there are a lot of people who are trying to override scripture because they cannot accept miracles. And that means they've reduced their sense of possibility according to what science can say. But in the Ash'ari worldview, possibilities are not restricted to science, possibilities are restricted to God's creative powers. And this leads on to the third point, that the Quran must be read, apparently, you take it as dhahir, until and otherwise you need to kind of move away from the apparent meaning. And these includes things like, the contextual indication, the Arabic, and what have you. We'll get to some of the verses in a second. Finally, Ghazali makes it very clear in his Faisal Tafriqa that ahad hadiths are not, theologically binding. He acknowledges that, and this is a very famous stance amongst the mutakallimun, that they do not take ahad hadith as theologically binding because their epistemic status does not give us certainty. And this is a sharp division between the Ash'ari and some of the Maturidi scholars and the Ahl al-Hadith scholars, the theological school. So these are the principles that I'll be using to kind of evaluate those 4 positions that I discussed earlier, both metaphysically and hermeneutically. So this is what so we're looking at it from 2 angles, the metaphysics and scripture. So the question is, from a metaphysical point of view, can God create us through any of these frameworks? And given what I just said about the Ash'ari paradigm, it is logically possible for God to create us through a creationist perspective. It is logically possible for God to create us from a human exceptions perspective. It is also possible for God, for us to create, for him to create us through Adamic exceptionalism, as well as no exceptions. So all of these are metaphysically possible. There's nothing intrinsically wrong with evolution. I was having a discussion with one guy on social media, and he was adamant that evolution is intrinsically a deviant and kufr idea. I mean, that's how staunch he was. But from a theological angle, all of these are possible. There's nothing in anything of them that is wrong from a metaphysical angle. So that means the question then is squarely into the hermeneutic discussion. This is the key question here. Hermeneutically, what can you accept in terms of this classification scheme? And I think it boils down to this conversation. The metaphysics is unproblematic. It's the scriptural stuff that is, I think, raising more concerns than anything. I want to mention 2 points, preliminary points. There are a few hadith that are relevant to the discussion. For example, many people highlight the hadith about Adam being, 30 feet tall, sitta dara, right? And so some people use that as a means to kind of undermine evolution, to say that, look, there's a conflict here between Islam and the discourse. There are other hadith that look at Adam's creation. So he was created on a Friday, for instance. All of those hadith, if you look at their classification, they are all ahad. They're all ahad hadith, which means that from a theological angle, they do not give us epistemic certainty. And so therefore, from a theological angle, they are not binding for us. So the discussion has to be squarely based on the Quran. It has to be based on the Quran, given what I just said about ahad hadith not being theologically binding. Number 2, Ghazali has no problem accepting miracles. I mean, his 17th chapter in the Tahafut al-Falasifa makes this somewhat clear, right? So he has absolutely no problem with Adam being created out of thin air. And I highlight this because some people would there are some people who want to kind of overread the Quran with scientific readings. So they will consider the story of Adam or the narrative of Adam being a metaphor or some kind of fictional myth. And from a Ghazali's perspective, I would see that as a move of hermeneutic scientism, in that you're trying to kind of override these verses, these scriptural verses that are quite clear, with just a scientific appropriation because they don't fit in a scientific worldview. Whereas from an Ash'ari standpoint, it's not a scientific worldview that governs on those verses. It's the creative powers of God that I think you should view them through. So this is an important point that I want to highlight, that anything that kind of overrides verses just because to appease science-friendly readings would be a form of scientism, at least as far as I can tell. Now, scientism did not exist, of course, in Ghazali's perspective. So I do try to juxtapose his ideas and advance them in light of some developments in the current literature. So he, of course, would have never thought of scientism. And I'm saying this in my interpretation. If you juxtapose his thoughts today, he would definitely, I think, see this as a form of scientism. So there are several verses about, Adam's creation, so we have the idea that he was created from clay, and then there are multiple stages, turab and what have you. We have the verse about Adam and Eve, so in Surah Nisa, he created us from a single soul. وَخَلَقَهَا مِنْ زَوْجَهَا, so he created from it, its mate, and then from the two of them, you have all these men and women. This is generally used as a verse to indicate, that there is an entity called Adam, and all of us have a lineage that can be traced back down to him. And the biggest verse, I think the biggest obstacle for people who want to completely read the Quran with evolutionary readings is this one here. This is a very famous verse where you have the tamthil between Isa and Adam. And here, the verse, if you read it within the context of Surah Imran, it makes it very clear that we know that Jesus was created miraculously. Surah Maryam makes this very explicit, that Jesus was conceived miraculously. I want to make sure that's specific. And so Jesus was conceived without a father, right? And here we have a similitude between Isa and Adam. And the analogy that is being drawn here is that just as Jesus is a miracle creation, so is Adam. But the only difference is that Adam, he's qualified further as being created from dust. And given all the collective verses that refer to Adam being created from these base materials, we ulama have generally interpreted this verse to implicate that Adam was born without a mother and a father. There's even a hadith that contextualizes this verse, where you have Prophet Muhammad ﷺ, he was having a dialogue with some Christians from Najran, and they were refusing to accept evolution. Islam, not evolution, sorry, right? And they were refusing to accept it. So on that account, the Prophet ﷺ asked, why are you refuting Islam? Why are you not believing Islam? And then he said, I know, because you believe that Jesus was born without a father. And then this verse came down in response to that context. So when you put all the verses together, eliminating Adam from the equation as if he's some kind of metaphor or as if he has nothing to say about the conversation would be a bit of a hermeneutic stretch. So when you put all those conversations together, creationism is completely valid because there's nothing in the Quran that kind of indicates that things were created instantaneously. Now, some people could refer to some verses where it uses the word khalaqa. Khalaqa has different modalities in the Quran. It can be used to refer to abstract things. It can be used to refer to feelings, individuals, over time, instantaneously. So khalaqa is ambiguous. So when we talk about can animals or plants come out of evolutionary processes? From a scriptural point of view, there's nothing conclusive about this whatsoever. It is why even the most conservative scholars like Yasir Qadi and Sheikh Nukeller have no problem accepting non-human evolution, right? So that's an interesting point to take. But from a scriptural point of view, the possibilities that I arrive at, that creationism is compatible, right? So God could have created all of us instantaneously. That works. Human exceptionism is also possible. This is the picture that Allah allowed everything else to be created through evolutionary processes, but humans are the exception. Adamic exceptionalism is also, I think, compatible with the Quran, where there could have been, co- or pre-Adamic human beings that were running through evolutionary processes, and it's only Adam that was the exception to that whole thing. But no exceptions, believing that every single thing is a product of evolution would not be, I think, tolerated by Ghazali. So given his framework, I think these are the conclusions that he would arrive at. So in terms of summarizing my presentation, this is what I concluded from my study of looking at the discussion of Islam and evolution through the lens of Al-Ghazali. Metaphysically, none of these positions are intrinsically problematic. All are possible. Scripturally, however, no exceptions would be a difficult one to kind of stretch, because there are some key verses that make it difficult to interpret Adam with some kind of metaphorical or fictional or parental reading. So I'll end my presentation there. I hope it wasn't too cumbersome, and I hope I didn't speak too fast, because I have a habit of speaking fast. But I'll hand it over. I'll hand it over back to Hakan or Professor Alparslan to kind of take any questions here on. But thank you very much for listening to me. I hope that was edifying for you guys. So thank you.
Thank you very much. It was a very good presentation. At least we should be able to understand what the problem is with regard to evolution and its relation to Islamic beliefs, Islamic Aqidah system. At the moment, I don't see any hands raised, but maybe if possible, Shoaib, can you stop the screen sharing so then we can all appear? Yeah, this way it's easy to see if you raise your hand. Hocam, Colin has a question in the chat box first.
Okay.
Should we give him a chance to ask his question, and then Yunus Hocam raised his hand?
Sorry, Professor Alparslan, you want me to respond to Colin's comment?
Yes.
Right. Assalamu alaikum, Colin, hope you're well. It's been ages. So with regards to the point that he's made, it is not logically possible to create anything that is chaotic or random. So in evolutionary terms, right, the process has randomness in it, right? But I think people need to make a distinction between physical determinism and theological determinism. From God's point of view, everything is determined and there's nothing random about it. He always knows everything. He's always sustaining everything. He's controlling everything. From a physical perspective, though, what he manifests could be indeterminate or determinate. It could have chaotic elements in it. It could have non-chaotic elements in it. So there's nothing in God's power to stop him from creating those. So randomness does not necessarily mean God does not know, though some people have interpreted that way. That's a very strong interpretation of randomness and chaos. But God can still kind of create a totally, irregular universe where you cannot even do science because laws are changing all the time. But that would not undermine his knowing and his controlling everything. So that's the first thing. Lacking wisdom. So even here, lacking wisdom, God may have reasons for creating, for example, a totally chaotic world where you have no science. We just may not have epistemic insight into it. So even if God created a world where there are no scientific laws, that doesn't mean God is not Al-Hakim anymore. He could have his reasons, we just don't know, right? The same way when we know that there's a lot of evil that's done around the world, like natural evil, let's just say. I don't like using the word natural evil because it's a borrowed terminology. But even in that account, we don't say, oh, Allah did it. Allah should be held responsible. He has his reasons, we just don't know what they are. And according to, he cannot act justly. So this comes down to the moral determination, the meta-ethical principles that you adopt. From the Ash'ari standpoint, God can do whatever. He can reverse moral principles. He can switch moral principles. He can give us a totally moral framework if he wanted to. And this will depend on the background that you would have to adopt here. But from Ghazali, he's pretty much on the radical end of things. He has no problem saying, for example, that he could punish believers. He could send non-believers to heaven if he wanted to. So it will depend on your meta-ethical theory there. God knows best.
Okay, Yunus Hocam, please go ahead.
Okay, Shoaib, thank you very much for the interesting presentation. Now I want to make a few remarks. Number one, you said that God can create anything. There is nothing, holding it. He has absolute power. So he can do things, as he wishes. There is no limit to his power.
Yeah.
Literally, it is correct. In reality, it is not correct because God has, the attributes. That is, he has, all the names. And one of the names is Hikma. And all the names are really merged in one. And they limit each other. And they really don't allow them to do other things. For example, God can commit injustice. Okay? But his name, just, will not allow that. Okay, now relevant to our topic is the attribute Hakim. That is, God has wisdom. He is Hakim. He does everything with a purpose, and he does not do anything without a purpose. And if you look at, let's say, creation, there is really anything which is nonsensical. Everything is done, created with a purpose. And altogether, they form, I think, a melody, beauty, I don't know, there is, compatibility, there is the big picture and everything. That is, everything looks like, one thing. Like everything came out of, one hand with one, purpose and with infinite knowledge. I think the dimensional knowledge is very important. You cannot do anything without knowledge, including, let's say, the purpose. Everything is purposive. So as a result, we can say that in the universe, let's say, dividing the creation as to, okay, Adam is special for me, I'll take care of it. The other things, I can give it to causes, other things, whatever. It is not, consistent with the overall philosophy of, let's say, God's nature and character. So it is one, it is all or nothing, because everything is consistent. The whole thing is, just one. And also on that point, let's say the laws of nature, which is called also Shariatu Tekwiniya. That is, the whole universe has one constitution. That is, the whole universe really is created using just, one template. And if, let's say, you create something from one template, everything has to be, compatible with each other and consistent. And I think our observations kind of inform that. That is nothing, again, without any purpose. And the laws of creation, okay, they are simply the constitution of the universe. And the constitution is not an agent. That is, constitution cannot do anything. It doesn't have, the power there. It doesn't have the knowledge. It doesn't do anything. Even, let's say, Sharia cannot prevent you from, let's say, stealing. It says, don't steal, but, cannot prevent you. It is not an agent, or a stop sign, cannot really stop you. There is the problem of agency. Now, I think the laws of nature certainly is a template, but the laws of nature themselves, if you look at, let's say you look at the whole process of evolution, again, they rely on the laws of nature, okay? And it is the template for the behavior of the physics. That is the matter, energy, particles. You are a scientist, you know this, well. So any behavior, any activity must conform to the laws of nature. Miracles are exception because the lawmaker can always make an exception. That is, since he put the laws to the universe, because the laws themselves do not come from matter energy, okay? They are like a different dimensional existence. Not only that, they are a higher dimensional existence because they subjugate matter and energy. Mm-hmm. All the physical creation, they obey the laws and the forces of physics, nature, whatever, which comes, from the attribute irada. That is, the will. everything, subject to that. Now the laws of nature and the forces of nature. The forces of nature, as you know, two effects, just, push-pull, nothing else, okay? We have, let's say, the template and then the push-pull effect. And if you look at these, okay, in addition to matter and energy, obviously nothing can come out of, let's say, this combination. All you can have is, if you look at this desert, some sand hills, maybe, some rain, some either wind, I don't know, earthquakes, whatever, hail, whatever, and then gatherings of matter, like, hills, whatever, okay? Therefore, the concept of life itself, for example, it is something which is beyond physics, okay? It is the reason we have, let's say, biology. Life has, different sets of laws, but again, let's say, if you look at just the concept of life, that itself, I think, it really is a different dimension that it is beyond physics, because what makes, a lively thing, living thing, one thing is that life, okay? And the evolution, for example, cannot even explain life, okay? That is how life emerges, because life is not chemical reactions, life is, whatever, okay? It is, completely different. And here, let's say, we are missing an agency. Anytime you have something which is purposive, okay, you must have an agency, and that agency must have the purpose, the will, the knowledge, and the power. Evolution leaves all these blanks, okay? Therefore, now what we have is the, I think, the template. Evolution certainly can be used as a template, but the template is not a maker. The problem here is that evolution is envisioned as a creator, an engineer, a making. Look at the documentaries. Now, evolution, did this, evolution did that. Wow, what is this evolution? I mean, the things that, the attributes that are given to evolution are like God's attributes. It is like, we are naming God with all the knowledge, the will, everything, evolution, in a sense. Otherwise, you cannot explain these things. Let me give an example, and then I'll ask you to comment on that one. Let's say the way I look at, let's say, the evolution. If you look at, let's say, the cars, let's say Ford Model T, the famous, okay? We can say that, let's imagine there is only Ford in the world as cars. The model, which was more than 100 years ago, Model T, very simple car. And then they said today, modern Fords, okay, luxurious, even less self-driving, whatever. And typically car companies, they come up with a new model every 4 or 5 years. Now let's put all the, models together. And when you look at them, you can say that, they are related. And one really comes from the other, okay? But just this observation saying that this model, because they have so many similarities, must come from the other model, it doesn't mean that this observation creates it. That is every passage from one model to the other, okay? Behind it, it has a team of engineers, purposive beings, knowledgeable, I think smart people there who know what they are doing, or what they are aiming. They know what to do it, and they know how to do it, and they know how to rule the matter energy accordingly, above and beyond the laws of physics. That is, the laws of physics are there, but they manipulate things so that they have a secondary influence there. Therefore, if let's say we just say that, oh, very easy, we had the Model T somehow, wind, hail, and then, now we have eventually modern cars just happened. It doesn't happen that way. If let's say you leave it into randomness, okay, and this is the core thing in evolution. That is, there is no purpose, there is no intent, there is no knowledge, although now they are saying knowledge is like almost a creator, okay? If you look at those principles, the evolution thing should really be something minor, nothing more than a template. What is troublesome is evolution is presented as an agent with a will, with knowledge, with power, whatever. And I think if you look at it that way, it becomes like, you either believe in evolution or you believe in God, which is very unfortunate. So what is your take on this? Sorry, I took a long time.
No, those are very interesting points. So I agree with you that I think there's a false bifurcation between belief in God and belief in evolution. I think that's a false picture. I think just like how we have electron distributions in atoms, which God is controlling every single moment, the same way that evolution doesn't need to be stripped of a theistic perspective. Evolution is an explanation. It is not an agent. I think nothing in science is an agent. Electrons are not agent. Atoms are not agent. So I am very consistent in the sense that I don't believe that just like how I don't assign agency to planets, to forces, to whatever have you, all of those are operational parameters imposed by God onto creation. None of them are devoid of God. So evolution, when it is when it is treated as an agent, then it becomes problematic. And this is the narrative that you atheists feed religious people, that you have to be this or this. Whereas I do not see that that's a false bifurcation and should be eliminated from the equation. So that's the first thing. The second thing that you mentioned about Al-Hikma. Now, Al-Hikma is something that's a very, very strongly embedded even in the Maturidi school, for instance, right? However, and this is related to your point about purposes. In the Ash'ari paradigm, God has no gharad. He has no purposes. He is a purposeless being, right? He can, however, insert maqasid in his creation. He can insert that. And there's a distinction between gharad and maqasid that the Ash'ari scholars make, including Ghazali. God has no intrinsic purposes to himself. Otherwise, that would make him a deficient human being. However, when he creates things, he can assign end goal purposes for those creations. So from a theological angle, to assign purposefulness to God would be at least from Ghazali's perspective, would be problematic. And he makes this very clear in the Iqtisad. So I would personally disagree that God has to have purposes. Creation can have purposes. He can assign creation purposes, but I don't think he has to have purposes. And this relates to the point about hikmah. Again, the point is about epistemic accessibility. God could create a totally different world to us for multiple reasons, right? He could have it this way, that way, all possibilities that are there. We wouldn't be able to know why he created it. Just like there's so many things we don't know on a daily basis why he did things in a certain way. If we extend that to the entire world and he created a different creation altogether, we wouldn't be able to know. That would not undermine his hikmah. So those would be my responses to the points that you've made.
Okay, but just one thing. Let's say on the purpose thing, you said God does not have a purpose.
Yeah.
How do you incorporate it with the name Murid? That is, God has, irada, and one of the attributes is Murid. And irada means, something to wish, doesn't do without, let's say, wishing. And hikmah, I think hikmah, the name hikmah, should limit the doings into something meaningful. And I think if you combine those, okay, I think we both agree that creation, everything is kind of purposive. But since creation comes from the creator, I think the reflection, or I think the source of it also should, dwell in that, in that being, and that being should be, purposive and some kind of, will there.
Yeah. No, so I just want to make it clear. So these are, valid theological differences, right? Or philosophical differences, however you want to incorporate them. My point is that from a Ghazali lens, right? Omnipotence is the stress. In Maturidi, it's hikmah that is the stress. So they stress more on hikmah, actually stress more on omnipotence. The idea of God being al-murid, they define will as something that distinguishes one from the other, not that it has intrinsic purposelessness to it. So he wills one things to another, right? So if he has all these possibilities, he wills one, but to say and to extend that claim that he has intrinsic purposes would be somewhere that the Ash'aris might deny on this matter.
Okay.
Okay, there is another question. Would you like to answer that one in the chat box by Sister Nadine?
All right, okay. Thank you, Sister Nadine. So thank you for the eye-opening. What were state of evolution? Did it really? So Nadine, thank you very much for your question. I was actually looking forward to Hussein's talk because he was going to talk about Sayyid Nursi in the context of evolution. I personally wouldn't know what he would say. I believe that Sayyid Nursi would be more like on the Maturidi front. So I think he would deny Darwinian evolution. I have a very, very, very strong feeling that he would deny, like he would not be able to entertain randomness and all of that together. That would be my perspective. but this is just me speaking from a very, very superficial angle. I mean, there's this panel filled with Nursi scholars, so I think they can maybe voice this better than me. Wallahu alam. I don't know. Wallahu alam.
Maybe in future someone will give us a webinar on this, on that issue.
Yeah,
That will be
yeah.
very good.
I'm looking forward to Hussein's talk. I'm really looking forward to Hussein's talk.
Yeah, because where is Dr. Nejati? I think I had some debates with him that there are in the Rasail, I have found statements that is confirming evolution, but not Darwinian evolution, of course.
Okay.
That is not the case.
Really? He talked about evolution?
Not directly, but some statements that refer to that.
Okay,
And,
wow.
Yeah, and then Dr. Nejati, he tried to find statements that are against evolutionary theory. So maybe in future we can have a debate on this, inshallah.
Yeah, I would love to see that. That would be very interesting. I would love to see that.
Faris Hocam, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr.
Alaikum
Shoaib. Thank
salam.
you very much. That was, very precise, net, and easy to understand, to follow you. Mine is not a question, actually, it is a request. Since you have given a lot of thought, to Al-Ghazali and other Western, evolutionist ideas, can you give a bit time to read 23rd Flash?
Of Nursi?
Yeah, in flashes, 23rd Flash.
Yes, I actually, yeah, I have the PDF of 23rd Flash. Yep.
Yeah, Dr. Hakan can send it to you. And inshallah, maybe next time we can, you can add Nursi beside Al-Ghazali regarding his ideas about creation, about evolution and all, that's kind of stuff. My request is this, from you.
Okay, I promise you I'll do that, inshallah. I will
Thank
do
you.
it, inshallah. I promise you that.
Shukriya.
But anytime.
There is one concept which is very common in Islamic thought, all the way, I would say, right from the 1st century onwards, defending a type of evolution. And the concept that they use for this is tekammul. And Ustaz also approves tekammul. And he says, in fact, in the universe, tekammul rules, over everything. So in other words, that we can see that there is always, a kind of more moving towards perfection, looking for the root meaning of the term tekammul. But I don't know how to translate, whether it would be possible to translate this as evolution or development. This is another case. But there are some other thinkers, of course, in the past, they refer directly to this evolution. Many, in fact, even Maulana Rumi also has some statements concerning this. So this would be another point that we should, pay attention to.
Professor Alparslan, I have a question on that. So are you sure when he's using tekammul, is he using this in relation to the great chain of being, not evolution? Because some people, they use this in the great chain of being as well.
Now, he says
Right.
that mailul istikmal. Mailul istikmal. Mail, mail is inclination towards perfection.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So this seems like great chain of being discussions.
Yeah, you remember the poem that he quotes from Abdullah Cevdet? That in that he says, tekemmül kainatta hüküm fermadır. I think something like that.
Brother Shoaib, wasn't that the poem from Maulana that you asked me to find for you for your article?
Yeah. So that's the article
Yeah, that is the same thing. That is the poem from Maulana that Apostron is referring to, I believe.
Yes.
It's the mode of being. Yeah, the chain of being.
Yeah, so that's what I think. That I think there's a distinction. A chain of being is a metaphysical picture, whereas evolution is more of a scientific or a material theory. And
Right.
they have, of course, apparent overlap, but substantially they're quite distinctive.
I actually have a question. May I ask my question, or is it not my turn yet?
So please go ahead, ask your question.
Okay. Shoaib, this was awesome. I've been looking, as you know, you and I have chatted before about this. I'm extremely interested in this topic. So thank you so much for the presentation.
I reference your work, Nasreen, in my book.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Thank you. I'm really looking forward to reading your book, inshallah. What I wanted to just ask, maybe, have you seen throughout the research process, because that's where my head is pointing me. I just want to see if you've seen this, that in the process of evolution, which category this might feel, I don't know, but perhaps looking at other human beings being on Earth prior to Prophet Adam, but he is the magic one in a way that the idea of, or the faculty of free will, ikhtiyar, was given to him. So before Adam, they were human beings, right? Just like, in a jungle, just like other animals. We are basically animals, and that they have progressed in a way, right? So from my reading, and I remember Allama Iqbal and actually saying something about, we have to find it. I think I might have texted you before about this, but it seems to me, and I really like this idea to look at this whole process of seeing that there were other human beings, on Earth. Adam, though, is at the point that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants this person, like the process of takamul, or the evolution, has come up to a certain degree where now this human being can distinguish between what is good and what is bad. And therefore, the faculty of ikhtiyar, and we have that verse in Surah Al-Ahzab, وَعَرَضْنَا الْأَمَانَةَ, the amana that we gave to the heavens and the earth, and nobody accepted it. So from a lot of research that I've done, this amana is actually free will, right? Because in the entire creation, the only entity that has the ability to not to go forward with what Allah wants is human being, right? Because everything else, they just do it intrinsically. The sky, every bird, every rock, everything, the whole natural process, every creature or every entity is following that intrinsic path, right, towards completion. Human beings have the choice, right, to either follow the guidance of Allah or go against it, right? So I'm just wondering, have you seen this perspective in your studying to perhaps look at Adam as the archetype, right, of human beings, as well as maybe at the time that this free will was given to him?
Yeah, so there are 2 points here. With regards to Allama Iqbal, he takes this from a biblical crossover. He believes that Adam is not an individual. He's not a historical person. He is a symbol for humanity, right? Yeah. Hermeneutically, however, this would be difficult because of scriptural mechanics that you want to employ here. But and on the second point about Adam being gifted free will, right, as you speak. So there are 2 discussions that I've looked into, but I haven't written about, because this is I think a whole other discussion that needs to take place. The first is the discussion about, do non-humans have ruh or not? And people like Imam Razi, they said that on this we have to do tawaqquf, because their evidence is for it, their evidence is against it. So that was the first thing that I found interesting, that even ulama, they looked at this question and they tried to determine whether even non-humans have ruh or not, have some kind of a spiritual element. Now, the free will concept, I agree with you that it seems to be that humans have been gifted this idea of free will, right? However, it seems that free will was not exclusive to humans. Like, for example, the jinn had it, right? They are able to kind of have their own, like Iblis, for example, he was able to go against the commandment of God. There are even weak, very weak ahadith, like very, very weak, that refer to some kind of preceding entities called the hin, the bin, who could have been, I don't know, these earlier humans that you're talking about. Perhaps, I don't really know. But in terms of clear elucidation about this, I haven't heard anything about it. The closest that I've come to is the idea of language, that humans, once they had language, civilization kicked off. But being able to trace that, so what now, it gets more trickier because, for example, how do you classify language? Is verbal communication enough? Are paintings enough? Are non-verbal communication enough? You know, so like, when do you draw the line? So as you get deeper into higher resolution about identifying what is language, what are the prerequisites of language, you begin to see that the areas begin to get very murky. So this is a thing that what I tried to do was, if there's ambiguity, it's just open to speculation, open to possibilities. What is clear is that Adam was definitely gifted with something. What is unclear, however, is the human beings that could have been on earth, if they were given this or not. And if that is unclear, then they could have had this, and that's how maybe Adam was able to communicate with them, right? So I honestly do not have any clue about this. I think this needs an extensive research repository. This could be your new book project, Nasreen.
Yes, because from the scriptural understanding, from the Quranic view, that is the first time that we see human being making a choice, and this is a mistake. Even if we take Adam to be a historical figure, right?
Yeah.
Although talking about Allama Iqbal and his idea of looking at Adam as the archetype, like as a symbol of humanity, I think there's a lot of scholars in the Iranian context that go with that. There's a lot to think about and to write about. Maybe you and I can do a joint project on this.
So Nasreen, on that point, I was looking at a very well-respected scholar from Toledo. He was giving a lecture on, he mentioned this because I was looking at other perspectives, Ahmadiyya perspectives, Shia perspectives, and this one scholar said there are two things he mentioned. One, and this is I found very interesting, there's a hadith in the Shia corpus that is not existent in the Sunni corpus about there being 6 Adams before Adam. Have you come across something like that?
I haven't seen the hadith. I know that Imam Ali actually does have something close to that, and I will look at Nahj al-Balagha and try to find this. That he has a saying that before Adam there were human beings. Definitely he has that, but that Prophet Adam is actually the most perfected one, right? And that's why he is mentioned in the Quran. I try to find that reference for you in the Nahj al-Balagha.
Yeah, and even in the second point, he mentioned that even Ibn Arabi, he didn't say this from a hadith, but he was saying it from a Kashf perspective. But he mentioned that there are 1,000 Adams before Adam. He mentioned that apparently. So this was interesting.
And that shows then if we take this strata, that shows that historically speaking, Adam is probably the archetype, right?
Culmination, perhaps,
culmination. Right. It's very interesting. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay, Ahmet Yildiz, he has a question, I think.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum. Thank you for the presentation, Dr. Shoaib. I have a question from the vantage point of Ghazali's understanding of chaos versus cosmos. In terms of Ghazali's notion of theodicy, ليس بالإمكان أبدأ مما كان. How do you reconcile with each other this chaos, coincidental mutations, and the process mechanism of evolution? And of course, attached to this is his understanding of causation expressed in the form of iqtiran, that is a consecutive order in the creation. So and together with this, in fact, we need to remember proposition in usul, which is this: any possibility that comes into human minds has no relevance unless it is substantiated. Yeah. So from the universe, how can you infer this, that God can create a chaos, can create universe in the form of chaos, but we don't see chaos in the universe. Just as an istidrak to the discussion of tekemmül, I think this needs a little bit more attention. When you transfer a concept from a specific cultural setting to another one, you need to say, to support it. I think tekemmül in this context cannot be, met with the notion of evolution. It is more in the Aristotelian sense of theory of form. Everything has a nature, so-called natural inclination, entelekia, to gain its final shape. Mm-hmm. So a table has its final shape with its four legs and a smooth, face. Everything. So everything is in motion to gain that shape. That's entelekia, and that's also human beings has its, entelekia and its final form to begin through ilm and dua. So my question is just from the vantage point of Ghazali.
Mm-hmm. So evolution in a scientific context just means that it's open to multiple answers. So for example, when you have an atom and inside an atom there are electrons, we can never pinpoint that, say that the electron is here or here or here or here. That's why scientists, they never say that the electron is 100% here. They give responses in terms of percentages. So for instance, imagine you're playing hide and seek, yeah? You're in your back garden. And when you close your eyes and your friend is hiding, you have an estimate, maybe he's there, 30% there, 20% there. Those are estimations, right? So when we do these experiments, when we find out the electrons, we get these percentages from the experiments. 30% of the time, the electron is here, 50% here, 10% there. So this is what we mean by randomness, that you don't get the same thing every time. Whereas when I drop something, it always goes down. This is a deterministic law. There's no chaos, no randomness, it just goes down. In a random or a chaotic kind of explanation from science, we just mean things in terms of probabilities, not qat'iyat, in terms of probabilities. So this can comfortably work with Ghazali's notion of causality, where cause and effect are still under the operational command of God. He's still pulling the strings as much as he wants to, right? But the manifestation of that is you have now determinism and indeterminism. Both physical kinds of determinism are within the power of God. So there's nothing, unfortunately, the problem is that people, when they see randomness, it means God doesn't know what he's doing. He's just toying around. That's what they feel.
It is still orderly.
Yeah, it is still orderly. When we talk about scientific laws that have chaos or randomness in them, they still have a law that generates them. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever. So that's what I mean by you can comfortably fit this with a God who is operating the universe. You have this wonderful order, but it is done through chaotic and random elements according to the scientific description, not a metaphysical narrative that I'm speaking about here. So that's how it kind of reconciled these two. I don't know if that answered your question, Dr. Ahmed.
There are two more questions. One, Mustafa Tunar raised his hand a long time ago, and then Ibrahim Özdemir, inshallah. We have about 15 more minutes to go.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum. The first thing is this issue of Hikma. I think we, since I suppose most people here are from a Maturidi background, I just want to re-emphasize that this is a difference between the Ash'ari and Maturidi schools, and unless we acknowledge that, we will not be able to come to terms with the matter. But the actual questions, I have three, and I'll try to briefly ask them that I have are: one, how do we square this with Ghazali's occasionalism? Two, you talked about at the very beginning the notion of ahad hadith, and you said from a kalam point of view, this is not binding. But that something is not binding does not mean that it is irrelevant. So should we not still bring the ahad hadith into the discussion when we come to the point of likelihood, if not necessity? And third, I think I'm comfortable thinking about the first two options, creationism and was human exception that you mentioned. But when it comes to the Adamic exception, I'm for two reasons I'm having difficulty grasping that. One is, forget about the hermeneutics, etc. How can that, physically be possible? You have one individual among, I don't know, like 300,000 individuals, and they are coming, from the one individual. So from an actual, mechanics point of view, how is that possible? And the second is in 3 places in the Quran, God says, addressing humanity, Ya ayyuhan nas, we created you from one nafs, and then from that we created your spouse. So how do we put that together with this? Because if Adam alayhi salam was created and put into this aggregate of human beings, then he would be have to be reproducing with them, etc. So both the mechanics and hermeneutics, I think, seem to be problematic in there. But I suppose you have put some thought into this, so I wanted to hear that too. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments and questions, Dr. Mustafa, and thank you for joining today's conversation. So with regards to, I will start in the reverse order, if you don't mind. I'll start with the last point, right? So with regards to Adamic Exceptionism, the point here is that when Adam, when he was created miraculously, right? Let's just say he popped, right? Whatever, 100,000 years ago, he popped into existence. And when he popped into existence, there were human beings that were perhaps already there through the process of evolution, right? They could have been in any numbers. They could have been 10 of them, 20 of them, hundreds of them, thousands of them. We just don't know, because we don't know when Adam appeared. Anyone who claims that Adam appeared 7,000 years ago, with all of those hadith, are incredibly weak. They cannot be used as proof. We have hadith that go back to the Prophet ﷺ's lineage up to a certain point, but beyond that, we have literally no clue how many generations it goes to Adam. So we have no clue about when Adam appeared on earth. The biblical narrative is 6,000 years ago, but that's not something that we have epistemic robustness in. So in that point of view, whenever Adam appeared, when there were human beings on earth, he could have integrated with them, right? So just like a miracle, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he said, that he will raise the seas, he could easily create someone right in front of him out of dust, not a problem. And then from them, Eve was also created, right? So conceptually speaking, I hope that part is clear, that when he came, he was a miraculous creation, and these other human beings could have been coming out through the processes of evolution. And these human beings, right, if they did exist, I'm talking about possibilities, if they did indeed exist, they must have had some kind of level of language and comprehension skills. Otherwise, Adam would not be able to communicate with them, right? So if they did have that, again, we have to do tawaqquf. In hermeneutics, there's a concept of tawaqquf. If there's nothing in scripture, you will remain silent about it. So that means all possibilities are jaiz, possible. So if they were possibly there, then that means they could have integrated, they could have had families and all of that, or what have you. Perhaps Adam and Eve had kids, perhaps maybe not Adam and Eve integrated them, perhaps their kids integrated with them. All of these are plausible scenarios. So I hope that with regards to the mechanics, this is clear, the mechanics, not the hermeneutics. Now, the verse that you're referring to is in Surah Nisa, right? There are multiple aspects, but the one you're referring to is in Surah Nisa. That verse only tells us that Allah created, he didn't say that he started humanity with one. He said he created us from one, right? That we have nafsan wahida. Right? That we can be traced back to one. Now, khalaqa here is an ambiguous term because it doesn't mean literally, like we literally didn't come out of Adam, right? So there, it means that you have to stretch khalaqa a little bit more loosely here. So from him, Eve was created, and from these two, men and women came out. But there is nothing whatsoever to say in the Quran, and ulama have acknowledged this, that Adam is the first of human beings. That is a presumption we've generally had throughout the ages. That's generally a presumption we have had. But there is nothing in Islamic scripture that gets rid of this, that negates the idea of there being other human beings. And that is why when these two individuals, Adam and Eve, were created, their descendants could have mixed up with these human beings that were already on earth. And that fusion is led to the Homo sapien line through which me and you are products of. That's possible. That is possible. So I hope point 3 was clear, right? Let me know if not, inshallah, I can hopefully check. Now, I'm going to go back to your point about math. Yes, so this is a very clear difference between the Ash'ari school and the Maturidi school. So Maturidis focus a lot on Hikma, whereas for the Ash'ari school, it's about literally God's will and omnipotence. Hikma is more of it is a consideration, but not as strong as it is emphasized in the Maturidi system. the point about occasionalism, now occasionalism simply says it's a model where God is literally controlling every single atom, right? Every single moment, every single time. And that can still work with an evolutionary process. Remember, evolution is just a natural law, just like physics is a natural law. Just like how God governs every single electron, neutron, proton in the atom, he can govern the entire process of evolution as you go from the beginning of life till today. He could have done all of that. So there's nothing intrinsic in evolution that mystifies God's occasionalism. So I hope that was clear. And then your second point about Ahad Hadith, I agree with you entirely that Ahad Hadith are not necessarily something we should reject. There is a difference, however, in terms of from which disciplinary vantage point you look at Ahad Hadiths from. From a theological angle, a kalam angle, you must have very high epistemic status to be able to take things on for the sake of an argument, right? Now, Ghazali, don't get me wrong, uses Ahad Hadith, even in his Iqtisad, his theological treatise of the Ash'ari school, he uses Ahad Hadith. But there the qualification is, Ahad Hadiths can be used to substantiate points that are independent of Ahad Hadiths. They are either based on mutawatir or aql. They cannot be treated as individual proofs on their own. So that's the key difference here. In addition to that, Ahad Hadiths are used in fiqh. So Ghazali in his Al-Mustasfa, he does allow and permit Ahad Hadith in fiqh, but for theology, he has a higher standard. So it's very clear, at least from what I gather, that according to which hat he is wearing, his appropriation of Ahad Hadith differs. When he wears a Sufi hat, you can see him even using weak hadiths, even sometimes forged hadiths, right? The Ihya, it's well known that it has weak hadith, right? In his fiqh, he allows Ahad Hadith. In his kalam, however, he's very strict with Ahad Hadith. So depending on which lens he's wearing, he will see Ahad Hadith differently. So this is what I'm just trying to say. That's why I specifically mentioned that I'm looking at Ghazali not from a faqih perspective, not from a Sufi perspective. I'm looking at him as a mutakallim. And that means the epistemic status is very, very high for that.
Just to follow up on that. When it comes to differentiating between the human exception and the Adamic exception, would that not be a situation that meets the Kalam standard of referring to the Hadith?
So you mean like if the Ahad Hadith are incorporated, how might it impact between these 2 points? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
Yeah. So so here's the point, right? If you are from Ahl al-Hadith, the Salafiyya or the Athari perspective, you will not most likely be able to accept Adamic Exceptionism, because for the Ahl al-Hadith perspective, they believe Ahad Hadith are epistemically high. That's a definite point of difference between us and them, right? So they would have to believe in human exceptionalism. But if you occupy an Ash'ari lens or a Maturidi lens, right, you would have no problem accepting Adamic Exceptionalism. In addition to that, it's not just the Kalam perspective, it's also a hermeneutic perspective. What is scripture exactly clear on? What is qat'iyat? And what are possibilities, or there's nothing in the Quran altogether? So I mentioned the example of dinosaurs, but I'm going to repeat it again here. The Quran mentions nothing about dinosaurs, right? The Quran doesn't say you have to believe in dinosaurs, nor does it negate dinosaurs. So if you believe in dinosaurs or not, from an Islamic point of view, it makes no difference. Whether you believe in electrons or not makes zero difference, right? The same way, whether there are other human beings on earth, whether there were when Adam came down, makes zero difference. If you do, there is a possibility that Adam or his descendants could have integrated with them, and that is a jaiz opinion. That is jaiz, completely scripturally, if you permit the relaxation of the Ahad Hadith. But if you don't, you will be bound by human exceptionalism. And wallahu a'lam, God knows best.
Thank you.
I think it's my turn.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Ibrahim Hoja, please go ahead.
Thank you, Shoaib. It is good to hear you as always.
Likewise, Dr. Rahim.
And but there is a two Ghazali. You said I'm interested in Mutakallim Ghazali, but when he left for Damascus, just changed, not only changed his clothes, he changed all his mentality. All his major books, which we consider him as a Mujaddid or Hujjatul Islam, it is written in his journey to Damascus, Jerusalem, then to Khalil and Mecca and Medina. But at that time, he just says, he just emphasized again and again the importance of iman and akhlaq and practical ethics, let me say. Because he said in the Baghdad, in the court of the Sultan, in the court of the Khalifa, this practical ethical dimension was missing. There was very learned people, they were debating all the night on kalam issues, on philosophical issues, but there was not, the Quranic akhlaq is not translated into this in their daily life. He wrote a lot about this, but when he is just presenting us how Allah has created the universe in his book Hikmatullah fi Makhluqatihi, Jawahir al-Quran, and also in Ihya, he just emphasizes, this is I think why Said Nursi says Ghazali is one of my spiritual masters. He just presents the creation so that you come face to face to Allah. You just feel face to face Allah when you are looking at the skies or the nature or whatever. Then, as everything there is in order, there is nothing is meaningless, purposeless in the nature. So your life cannot be meaningless and purposeless. I think this is one of the problems that this evolution, they are just people who like evolution is, and they don't mention it, because when you believe in evolution, you also get rid of the moral obligations from a religious perspective. You can see this in the personal life of many Muslims or even Christians. So there's an ethical dimension of evolution. So if there is everything randomness, there is a blind chance. There is no. So what I have to care about my life. And the second point, do you agree with me? As I read, arguments about evolution in the Muslim world, in Arabic, in English, in Turkish, there, as you just underlined, what the term, the concept creation means for the 1st century, 2nd century, and for Yunus Chengel or for Shoaib or Faris is different. Because the creation, what it is in hermeneutical sense, what it means on grammatical dimension and also on scientific dimension. I saw many Muslims who wrote on this issue, they don't have a scientific background. They don't have a background in sciences. Therefore, in the name of they are defending Islam, they are making just ridiculous statements. Thank you.
Yeah. Dr. Rahim, so I actually predicted you'd ask me a question about the ethics. I was actually prepared for it just in case, given your expertise in this area. So for me, and this is my, I'm being very apparent with my methodology. I believe Ghazali wrote each and every work with a particular hat for a specific audience. So if you read his Mishkat al-Anwar, and if you compare with al-Mustasfa, the language, the style, and the scope of the content is vastly different, right? In one, he's acting like a faqih. In the other, he's acting like a Sufi. Now, I agree with you, wholeheartedly agree with you, that from a Sufi hat on, he makes it crystal clear that man is not meaningless. If you ponder on and reflection on the creation, and Hikma is very clear, you have to use your third eye, and you will see that everything has a meaningful purpose. And he constantly, in his Al-Hikma, in his Ihya, he says that moral rectitude is the most important thing to getting spiritual ascension. He makes this crystal clear, right? No one is denying any of this, and nor am I undermining any of this work. I am just taking his Kalam discourse to address specific concerns. For example, randomness not being an issue in an Ash'ari framework. Naturalism is not something that we accept to begin with. We don't accept naturalism with electrons, let alone evolution. So I'm just taking some metaphysical concerns and just filtering them through an Ash'ari framework. That's all I'm doing with his perspective. Now, on the issue of purposeness, right? The Ash'aris, I think, are quite clear, whereas I think Ghazali might be a little bit ambiguous on this. Man cannot know his purpose in the absence of revelation. And this is a very famous divide even amongst the Ash'ari school and the Maturidi school. That from an Ash'ari stance, if you did not have revelation, your purpose is open to speculation. It is only revelation that grounds you in terms of who you are, where you're going. This is from a Kalam perspective. But from a Sufi perspective, he has no problem saying that purposes are identifiable. It is very clear that this has been made for a design, for the betterment of man, etc., etc. So methodologically speaking, I agree with that wholeheartedly. That is why in the beginning of my book, I make it crystal clear. I am only and predominantly looking at his Kalamic framework to be able to understand these discussions. All of the others I have not considered for the sake of these conversations. And God knows best. Wallahu a'lam.
Shoaib, may I just ask one quick question? What book are you referring to when you say Kalam, his theological?
He has a few works that I would say that come under the Kalam rubric, because remember, sometimes these are mixed. His one of his last works before he kind of died off is Iljam. I have the book here. It was the last book before he died. Iljam something, I forgot the name of the book.
Iljam al-Awam and Ilm
Yes, Iljam al-Awam, that's the one. Yeah, that's the one, right? So that's the.
And we have English translation of this or no?
Yes. There's Sheikh Abdullah bin Hamid from Zaytuna University, Zaytuna College. He translated it. That's one. The Al-Mustasfa, in the beginning of Al-Mustasfa, it's a late work of his. It's a legal theory work, but in the beginning, he regurgitates the entire meta-ethical theories of the Ash'ari school, showing that even when he developed his spiritual phase, he still retained his Ash'ari kalam. So that is one. The Iqtisad fil I'tiqad, that is the other one. What were some of the? I mean, you have the second volume of the Ihya, the second book of Ihya. Risala Qudsiyya, but the Iqtisad is basically a more souped up and advanced version of that. So I recommend just sticking to that, and that'll be more than enough to kind of get you going.
Okay,
with this
great. Thank you.
Yeah. And his Faisal Tafriqa, that'll be another one. Faisal Tafriqa.
Okay. Two comments and one question, Shoaib, for you. Okay, the first comment is about Said Nursi and evolution. Okay, first of all. The physical evolution of the universe, that is before there was life, Said Nursi has no problem with what physics says.
Yep.
That is, the universe was this, and then the elements were formed, and then the skies and the earth became habitable, this and that, whatever. Said Nursi has no problem with that. He said it is very compatible with the way, let's say, God thinks, the gradual perfection of everything. But with the evolution of living beings, I think his stand is very clear. He says that every single species has its own Adam.
Has its own?
Adam. The prophet Adam.
Oh, okay.
Okay. That is their, let's say, father, grandfather, whatever. That is, Said Nursi clearly states that every species is created with purpose as it is. Okay, and of course now we have, let's say, if you look at the genes, for example, the human DNA genome, whatever, probably is not very different than even a fly, okay, or other species. It is very clear that they have the same root. That is, somehow you do some modifications, and you get a new species there. Okay, so. Here, of course, the point is that it's just like the car metaphor. That is, when you, let's say, change a model, create, let's say, a new model, whether you start from the previous one, modify it, or start from scratch, it is really irrelevant. That doesn't matter. What matters is that, there is an intent there is the knowledge, and there is the power to do it. And evolution does not address that. And I think the main weak point of evolution is the second comment. If, let's say, we find a needle, okay, as we dig, just a needle. One side is sharp, the other side has a hole. We immediately say that this is an archaeological artifact. Why? Because it cannot be the result of the laws of physics or force of physics. Why? Because it has, purpose. Obviously, it used, knowledge. Obviously, it needs special attention that is beyond the laws of physics. So we classify it as an archaeological artifact, saying that this is made by humans. That is, people with, knowledge, with intent, with whatever. Okay. Therefore, I think from that point, evolution, I think, certainly has some difficulties there. But the question I have is, logically, I have difficulty understanding saying that, okay, I believe in our father, Prophet Adam, as created, something unique, but there were also humans, Homo sapiens on Earth. He came and interacted with them, whatever. maybe, you know, they married or whatever. It is kind of, to me, it looks like illogical, and I would like to have, you know, your thought on that, because when Allah does something, okay, his hikmah requires that he always takes the shortest cut, okay, and he never wastes anything. So I think he uses the minimal of resources, everything. He forbids, let's say, waste. It is like, you know, israf is, you know, haram. That is eat, drink, but, you know, don't waste. So if there are, let's say, human beings on earth already, kind of, you know, creating a special another one, which will be just like the other ones, with a, you know, big, I don't know, pronouncements or whatever, it doesn't look like, you know, it is compatible with, you know, God's hikmah, whatever that. Therefore, or is it, can you, let's say, do you see it as compatible, or what do you think? If let's say there are other human beings with the capability of humans, which means, you know, a mind which is very different than, let's say, monkeys, other things, okay? And also the desires, the emotions, huge difference. What makes the difference between humans and animals? Because body-wise, we are really an animal, hardly any difference. What sets us apart is really our understanding, the mental faculty, the I think capability to learn, to acquire knowledge, to, you know, acquire meaning, to a certain meaning, aspirations, emotions, whatever, which has nothing to do with really biology. So how do you incorporate these things?
Right. Thank you very much, Dr. Jalajel. So I think here again, we will see an apparent areas of tension between the Ash'ari school and the Maturidi school. From an Ash'ari perspective, God can create as much waste as he wants. The Ash'aris will simply say, so what? What does that have to do with anything, right? So if for me, personally, I have no problem believing in Adamic exceptionalism. I make it very clear in my book that I'm not saying this is wrong or this is right. I'm saying these are possibilities. So for me, the highest possibility that you can do in terms of alignment is Adamic exceptionalism, as argued by David. So I have given this point of difference between having a hikmah focus and not having a hikmah focus, I have no problem believing that Adam was created. There were these other human beings, and he could have started. I mean, there's so many things in earth that just mystify you, and that doesn't make me believe that it undermines God's hikmah. God may have a reason for it. I just don't know what it is. So for me, that's not really an illogical thing. I'd say that what I try to do is the biggest, I think, area of difference between a hikmah-oriented worldview and the Ash'ari worldview is that theological possibilities are not curtailed by what humans are preconceiving as wisdom. That's the fundamental difference, I think, between these two schools. And from that point of view, it's why I do not see anything contentious with Adam being created and him having, integrated with these other human beings if they were there. Because scripturally, it's silent on the matter. So that possibility is then immediately, stricken up. And therefore, if that possibility exists, it's compatible. As for the point about evolution, so I want to stress this again, evolution is never an agent. It's presented as an agent, but I feel that this is a thing that new atheists literally harp on. They want to emphasize that evolution undermines religion. That's why they create a false dilemma. You are either a believer or you're an evolutionist. You cannot be both. But we believe, as always, with everything in science, we believe that Allah orchestrates the electrons with its probability. If people had generally speaking, if people had problems with randomness and probability, they would deny electrons, the first thing, because it's more fundamental than physics. So more fundamental than biology. All of physics undergirds biology. Electrons are completely random. Like whenever you have an electron distribution, it's so random. But yet we don't have a problem with electrons, we have a problem with evolution. So I believe that, that God created, if he created us through the process of evolution, it does not undermine anything as long as we do not adopt naturalism. The key problem in this entire discussion is naturalism. Evolution plus naturalism equals disbelief in God. But evolution plus God does not mean disbelief in God. You can still have an orchestrated process by God himself. So that is my take on it. Now I concede, by the way, that right now scientists are having a debate in revising evolution, not common ancestry, just to be clear. They're having debates about the mechanics of evolution, natural selection, random mutation. They are suggesting now there are perhaps other causal mechanics that need to be added in to explain the some factors that neo-Darwinism cannot explain. That is a discussion happening today. And the new movement that is behind this is called the Extended Evolutionary Synthesis, EASE. So that is something that may interest you, Dr. Chandra, because I know you're interested in the science stuff. So check them out. The person who's running this, his name is I think you may know him, Massimo Pigliucci. He's behind one of these movements. Very interesting stuff. Very interesting stuff.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think that's all. We come to the end of our today's session. I am grateful to Shoaib Malik to give this nice presentation. It was very good. We all enjoyed it. So I would like to thank you, Shoaib.
Thank you very much.
Accepting this. You're welcome.
Thank you.
We'll see you, inshallah, next time again in our webinars. If you have time, we'll be glad to host you.
Inshallah. Thank you very much, everyone. Have a wonderful evening. I look forward to the next few talks, particularly Hussein's, inshallah.
Okay.
And I hope that I didn't insult anyone, or I hope I didn't frustrate anyone with my points of views. But inshallah, I hopefully that I learned a lot from everyone. And I hope that if you can forgive me if I was hasty or if anything like that.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much again.
Thank you.
Have a safe journey
See you in 2 weeks
Dubai.
in our next webinar, inshallah.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum. Assalamu alaikum. Bye-bye.
Alaikum salam.